This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Libya's National Liberation Army commanders meeting with President Macron set for next week. Will it achieve the ceasefire? A new UN survey indicates 90% of South Sudanese people expect lasting peace by the end of the year. And at least 15 people killed in floods in Mali's capital, Bamako, after nearly 5 hours of rainfall. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. In business, mining giant Anglo American opens Zimbabwe's first platinum smelter. And in sport, we talk to Uganda's rising javelin star Josephine Lalam as she sets her sight on the 2020 Summer Olympics. Libyan National Army Commander Khalifa Haftar is expected in France next week, where he will meet President Emmanuel Macron to discuss the resumption of political dialogue in Libya. This comes after his visit to Rome, where he met with Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte. Fighting between LNA forces and the Tripoli government continues despite calls for a ceasefire by European powers and the UN. Haftar has accused Libya's government of national accord of supporting terrorism. Meanwhile, the UN-backed government sees Haftar's offensive on the capital as a threat to the country's stability. Both sides have been meeting with international leaders to convince them of their individual stands. Well, according to the United Nations, insecurity and violence in and around the capital has led to the deaths of at least 432 people. Thousands of others have also been displaced since the beginning of Haftar's bid to take over Tripoli. Well, for more on this, we are now joined by CGTN's Elena Casas, who is in Paris for us. Elena, Haftar is visiting Europe next week and will meet with the French president. What's the likely agenda?
Well, French President Emmanuel Macron says he wants to help push a UN bid for a ceasefire between Haftar's forces and those supported by the UN-backed government in Tripoli. He did meet the Prime Minister of that government, Fayez al-Sarraj, here in Paris last week, so he has been talking to both sides. But the French government, of course, has been criticised internationally in recent months for having supported Haftar or being seen to support Haftar. It's certainly true that the French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has seen Haftar as an important ally in the region since the sort of collapse of Libya following the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Certainly the French government has felt that Haftar could help bring stability to the country, but of course that approach has come under fire in recent months given the violence of Haftar's attempt to take Tripoli.
Well, Eleanor, France has been pushing for a ceasefire in Libya, as we know. How does President Macron hope to achieve this, would you say?
Well, by talking to both sides. He did, as I say, meet the Prime Minister of the internationally recognised government last week, and now he hopes to talk Khalifa Haftar around to this ceasefire. Macron certainly sees that France has an important role to play in North Africa, and it's an area, a field in which he wants to sort of assert a French role in the region. Historically, it's been Italy rather, of course, which is the closest European power to Libya. The French and Italian governments have strained relations at the moment, and that is partly because of Libya, because Italy sees it as part of its international field of influence and doesn't want the French government interfering, but certainly Macron sees it as an international file that he would like to take a key role on, and he is trying to become the international figurehead, if you like, of this UN attempt to bring the two sides to the table and get them to talk about a ceasefire.
Okay, thank you for that update. That was CGTN's Elena Casas there for us in Paris. Well, earlier we spoke to our Cairo correspondent Yasser Hakim on the recent developments in Libya from the international perspective.
the Italian Prime Minister said that he has invited the Khalifa Haftar to visit Italy after he held talks with Fayez Sarraj, the head of the Presidential Council. Khalifa Haftar is also planning to go to Paris. And I think the meetings, first by Fayez Sarraj and then by Khalifa Haftar, the trip to Europe, is to try to convince the European powers of their stance. Obviously, Fayez Sarraj, the head of the transitional government, that is also trying to convince the international community that Khalifa Haftar is trying to destabilize the state and trying to divide Libya, while Khalifa Haftar is convincing the Europeans and the other powers, the international community, that Fayez Sarraj is supporting and is backing terrorists, militias and extremists in Libya, and that his war is on extremism and terrorism to end it from Libya. And obviously the Italian Prime Minister is trying to forge some kind of ceasefire at the moment, but obviously the softening of the stance concerning several European powers concerning Khalifa Haftar, they have softened their stance concerning him, and US President Donald Trump, who had earlier also said that he supports Khalifa Haftar's actions and fight against terrorism, has prompted Fayez Sarraj and the transitional government to try to increase its efforts and diplomacy to try to reach a ceasefire with the European powers. Until now, there is some kind of division between the political powers. The UK and Germany and the United States are now giving room for Khalifa Haftar to continue his war, and they have not been taking a tough action against him or calling on him to stop the war as strongly as before. On the other hand, Italy is a country that is backing and supporting Fayez Sarraj and the government and the Libyan government, and therefore it has been trying to reach some kind of ceasefire, especially that the war is continuing in Libya and in Tripoli, especially that today there has been more clashes and air raids around or close to the airport in Tripoli. So the war is continuing in spite of the diplomatic efforts from the European sides and the UN.
To other news now. South Sudanese refugees are fleeing into the Democratic Republic of Congo's remote northeast Ituri province. The refugees, who are sheltering in the town of Aru, fled fighting along the border between South Sudan and Uganda. Our reporter Daniel Arapmoy has been speaking to the UNHCR spokesperson in Kinshasa.
Persistent fighting between government and rebels of the National Salvation Front, who have rejected the peace accord, is driving hundreds of South Sudanese refugees into the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Some of the border areas have also been affected themselves. Even we have seen incursions into Congo by South Sudanese groups.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees says 554 South Sudanese refugees have so far been registered in the DRC since the start of May. Many of those fleeing the fighting are women and children, including widows, who are in dire need of humanitarian assistance.
We need more international support in order to do the basic things for these refugees, and in order to avoid very negative impacts on the humanitarian situation and on the people concerned.
According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the new arrivals are among nearly 100,000 South Sudanese refugees in the DRC's owned Ulele and Ituri provinces. Daniel Arapmoy, CGTN.
Well, staying in the Democratic Republic of Congo, funding for Ebola is drying up despite an alarming increase in the number of cases. The International Federation of the Red Cross warns that without additional funds, it will be forced to significantly scale back operations in 2 weeks' time. We hear from the IFRC's Director of Health now.
The epidemic has been going on for 40 weeks, since August 1 last year. But in the last 3 weeks, we have seen 20% of the overall cases. So there's been a sharp increase in cases in North Kivu and Ituri. Our funding gap at the moment is 60 million Swiss francs. And if I'm allowed just to say this, we should recognize that the international response was very strong 1 year ago when this epidemic started. And understandably, this epidemic has gone on for 12 months. There may have been some donor fatigue. Now, the epidemic situation of the past few weeks clearly calls for a step up of the response.
Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa is due to launch the Political Actors Dialogue Team. The team seeks to bring unity among political players and chart the way forward for the country. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya with the details.
Up to 5,000 members of different political parties are gathering here for the launch of the Political Dialogue Actors Team. This event follows 2 previous meetings of leaders of 18 out of 23 political parties that contested the July 2018 election. In February, President Emmerson Mnangagwa invited his rivals to sign up to talks aimed at national healing as well as resolving a number of economic challenges facing the country. The main opposition MDC alliance has refused to participate in the process and insists on foreign mediation. It is not clear whether its leader, Nelson Chamisa, will attend this event to which he has been invited. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has said the talks will go ahead with or without the MDC. Farai Mwakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Tanzania is looking to restructure its hunting sector through its Tanzania Wildlife Management Authority by introducing a new electronic auctioning system for hunting blocks next month. Well, the move is designed to improve transparency and stop corruption in that part of the tourism industry. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
Let's just start at the top. What exactly does TAWA do?
TAWA is mainly conservation. But in terms of animal viewing, but also in terms of hunting and other forms of utilizations, which include also farming of wildlife, sanctuaries, and also orphanages. The hunting area is roughly 300,000 square kilometer, which is, I would say, that's roughly 1/3 of the country's size. We have 159 blocks in total, which occupies these 300,000 square kilometers. So we are not short of hunting areas. Only that now we are embarking on a major rehabilitation of some of those which were not in good shape.
How big of a contribution is hunting tourism to Tanzania?
The tourism sector contributes around 17% of the country GDP. And hunting has a significant portion of that. For TAWA alone, we are making roughly $16 million per year, which is significant in terms of the national economy coffers.
So I know initially you used to use a tendering system to allocate hunting blocks, but now you're moving to electronic auctioning system. Why?
Yeah, we used to have what we call administrative system in allocation of hunting blocks and controlling the industry at large. But this has come with a lot of concerns. It is very subjective. We have resorted to electronic auctioning in making sure that we are not controlling fully what is happening up until somebody gets his hunting block. And this is also in line with the 5-year country development plan, which states clearly that it is going to abide to principles of good governance, and auctioning is specifically mentioned in that particular submission.
Now, looking at the sector from the top, what challenges does this hunting sector face?
Yeah, there had been up and downs in terms, particularly in terms of governance. and administration. And I think this partly also comes from this administrative, allocation of blocks that I was trying to explain here. But as we proceed, and of course with the event of the current government, which is extremely very strict.
Now, since the system is coming at a time where some people already have been awarded hunting blocks, what's the plan with this new coming auctioning system?
There are people who have 5 years. They've been waived for some time to make sure there is a smooth exit strategy.
So what do you want to tell the world with regards to hunting and being open for business? Or
we are embarking on a major re-engineering of the hunting industry, and people should feel free to contact us. Whoever is ready to come and work with us, we are ready to, to host him and make sure that we have a very balanced environment for the business.
We are going to a short break. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including at least 15 people killed in floods in Mali's capital Bamako after nearly 5 hours of rainfall. And Kenya's Sachangwan village remembers 130 people killed in fuel tanker tragedy 10 years ago.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm reporting from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Many people across the continent have lost their lives after being caught up in fuel tanker explosions. In Kenya, over 130 people died while scooping fuel from overturned fuel tankers. 10 years later, some of them still carry scars that remind them of the ordeal. Here's CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa with the details.
Visits to the Wall of Remembrance are painful reminders of the tragedy which unfolded here 10 years ago. The names denote the over 130 people who died on the spot in Sachangwan, deep in Kenya's Rift Valley, after a fuel tanker burst into flames. On the 31st of January 2009, a tanker ferrying fuel overturned by the highway. A section of locals rushed to scoop fuel. Others simply stopped to find out what was going on. When the tanker burst into flames, they were all caught in the fire. 35-year-old Daniel Wekesa survived the flames.
I was on my way from the farm and was only there for 15 minutes before the fire started.
He had 75% burns on his body, but he recovered. The scars still remain, inside and out.
Life was good before. I could find work easily like in hotels. Now people see my scars and they are afraid of me. I don't feel free around people. I feel sidelined.
All around Sachangwan are families affected by the tragedy. Some lost husbands, wives and children. Others, like 32-year-old Amos Rotich, are yet to find their footing.
I like to cover my body because I know I'm different from other people. I don't want people to see my scars.
If the government, myself included, could set up a business to employ these people, then the survivors wouldn't have so many problems.
This memorial was erected in memory of those who lost their lives during the tragedy. However, survivors of the Sachangwan tragedy fear that not enough is being done to prevent similar occurrences. In Sachangwan, life goes on. A decade later, the survivors are still picking up the pieces. The wall reminds them every day of their second chance at life. Wilkisa Nyabwa, CGTN, Sachangwan, Kenya.
Well, West African neighbours Niger and Nigeria have had almost identical fuel tanker fire tragedies. In the latest incident, 58 people died after a fuel tanker overturned and exploded near to the airport in Niger's capital, Niamey. Many of the victims had been scooping fuel after the tanker overturned close to railway tracks as it tried to park. So why are people continuing to put themselves at risk to obtain fuel? CGTN's Deji Badmus tries to explain more in this report.
Once beating, twice shy. That idiom does not seem to apply to many when it comes to scooping fuel from petrol tankers involved in accidents in Nigeria. It's far too common to see people scurrying for fuel from a falling fuel tanker, even though they're well aware of the risk. And when an explosion occurs, as is always the case, the result is death, sometimes in high number. In January this year, around 60 persons were killed in the Nigerian southern city of Calabar while scooping fuel from a tanker that ran into a ditch. This is after similar incidents had occurred elsewhere in the country, where a number of persons were killed. But the victims of the Calabar incident simply didn't learn from the previous accidents.
One of the root causes of this continuous loss of life through people going to scoop fuel has to do with our societal values. Our values as a society and our value as individual members of the society. The only reason why people go and be scooping fuel is because they believe they can make easy money out of it. Even if I scoop 5 liters, if I have a generator, I put it there, why will I go back there again if not for the lure of the money that I think is behind it? So the next thing to do in tackling this thing is to educate people that it's wrong for you to want to benefit from another man's misfortune.
That education is hardly lacking. In Nigeria, for instance, the government often runs media campaigns discouraging people from approaching fallen petrol tankers and scooping fuel. But the recurrence of the incidents simply means many are not heeding the warnings.
One of the values that we should begin to look at as a society is the importance of human lives, because it's human beings that improve the society in which they are. And where human beings don't realize that anything they do that makes them irrelevant in the scheme of things in society, such as going to scoop fuel, that eventually results in the loss of life, will result in the loss of the quality of the human resources that is in that society, that will eventually improve the worth of that society.
Poverty has also been adduced as one of the reasons why hundreds of men and women have died from tanker blast across the continent. Survivors of such accidents often say they plan to sell the fuel on the black market to make a living for their families. But the issue certainly goes beyond poverty. People are simply not learning their lessons. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The United Nations mission in South Sudan has been conducting a public poll. 2,300 people across the country gave their opinion on security, the country's prospects for peace, and the mission's performance in protecting civilians. CGTN's Noel Mwakugu has the results.
Most South Sudanese have either experienced death or displacement of a family member. Despite years of conflict, optimism is high among the population. 9 out of 10 believe there can be lasting peace in the country by the end of the year.
This perhaps comes as no surprise to people in this country who have suffered through the past 6 years of war and humanitarian suffering, but it is a staggering number of people who have had direct impact of somebody in their family dying.
A recent survey by the United Nations mission in South Sudan reveals the impact of war on ordinary citizens. 70% felt that the current security situation in South Sudan is either very or somewhat safe. 2,300 South Sudanese across the country took part in the poll. They answered questions on the country's prospects for peace and how well the UN mission was protecting civilians. Compared to a year ago, 80% felt the security situation was either much better or better.
It demonstrates the pain and the suffering that people have gone through in terms of loss of life and displacement. It demonstrates the absolute desire for an optimism for peace next year, and the fact that the situation is improved. But it does put, I believe, the focus very much on the leadership to ensure that that peace is delivered.
In September 2018, President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar signed a revitalized peace deal, but the two sides have recently extended the pre-transitional period. South Sudan's war-ravaged population will have to wait for another 6 months for a transitional unity government. Noel Makugu, CGTN.
China's fifth batch of peacekeeping infantry battalion in South Sudan has successfully passed the UN equipment inspection tests. The results serve as the foundation for the UN to offer financial compensation to troop contributing countries for their peacekeeping equipment and their facilities. This is the third inspection since China entered its mission in the area.
A UN inspection team of 9 people examining the equipment of the Chinese peacekeepers in South Sudan. It was part of a thorough exercise that took more than 5 hours. The first began by listening to the troops' briefing before instructing them to give on-site demonstrations of how they operate the equipment. The inspection covered weapons, vehicles, ammunition, food, medical equipment and self-sustainment services.
Your camp cleanliness is outstanding. The morale I see in the camp from the soldiers is good. All the major equipment that I inspected and I saw inspected today was at a high standard and it was clean and looked good. All the soldiers that I spoke to today were confident in their skills and drills with the vehicles and the other equipment. They were professional and courteous at all times, so thank you for that. In conclusion, overall, Chinbat has displayed on this COE inspection an excellent standard and is also one of the top TCCs within Sector Juba.
The inspection is carried out every 3 months. It seeks to establish if the equipment provided by the troop contributing to countries meet the requirements of peacekeeping missions. However, the terrain and weather could impact equipment's functions.
During the rainy season in South Sudan, it often rains heavily, which brings great difficulties to the maintenance of our vehicles. We focus on professional repairing power, work overtime to repair vehicle equipment, and focus on repairing wipers and electrical equipment that are easily damaged in rainy days. We ensure that the equipment is kept neat and tidy at any time, and the technical performance meets the requirements of peacekeeping missions and equipment verification.
Chinese troops have been involved in the peacekeeping mission in South Sudan since 2014. Chao Mohono, CGTN.
Crossing over to Mali now, where at least 15 people have died in the country's capital, Bamako, following heavy overnight rain that has flooded several parts of the country. According to Mali's Ministry of Internal Security spokesperson, the flooding caused serious damage and rescue teams were also deployed. Residents claim rubbish left in the streets has caused a blockage to evacuation canals leading to the flooding there.
For me, this is a warning for the Nyamakoro residents. We need to take care not to lose lives. They are talking about 6 to 10 people killed. We need to be cleaner. It's because of the rubbish that overflowed the river.
Escalating conflict in Cameroon's Anglophone regions is forcing civilians to flee their homes. Since 2017, many have been crossing over to Nigeria's Cross River, Taraba, Benue and Akwa Ibom states to find safety and shelter there. The UN Refugee Agency and the Nigerian government have registered over 30,000 refugees. Women and children account for 80% of the displaced population. UNHCR says it plans to put up more shelters at the Adigom settlement for new arrivals. Refugees are also being reallocated to another site, Okende. The agency has appealed for $184 million to assist displaced Cameroonians. There are fears that resources will be stretched too thin in the coming months if the influx continues. Let's now take a look at the situation on the ground.
They shocked my husband down and left me with 4 kids without have any support. So how should I going to live? Or how else should I going to live? It's not easy to leave your country to go and suffering to different country.
We have limitations in all of the major sectors that we have prioritized. The issue of registrations, the issues of food, the issues of water, the issue of shelters, the issue of health, the issue of education, because we do not have enough funding to be able to adequately provide and support their needs.
All the business news for you coming up after the break, including mining giant Anglo American opens Zimbabwe's first platinum smelter. And South Africa's state-owned oil company ventures into South Sudan's oil exploration.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that, and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Mining giant Anglo American has opened a $62 million platinum smelter in Zimbabwe, the country's first such refinery. This as President Emmerson Mnangagwa vowed to boost the country's valuable platinum sector, which accounts for 6% of global platinum output. The country is the #3 world producer of the mineral after South Africa and Russia. The construction at the company's Unki mine in Chirugwi followed government threats 5 years ago to ban the export of raw platinum to foster local processing. 3 miners, Anglo American Platinum, Impala Platinum and Aquarius Platinum, operate in Zimbabwe, which has the second largest platinum deposits in Africa. Kenya's largest bank by assets, KCB Group, has disclosed that it will acquire each share of competing lender National Bank of Kenya at 4 shillings and 19 cents. The figure is a significant discount to the capital-starved lender's book value and market value. In a circular to shareholders, KCB says the deal will be completed by creating and issuing new 147.3 million shares to NBK's investors, taking into account the two banks' average share price in the 180 trading days ending mid-March. KCB's share price averaged 41 shillings and 90 cents over the period. This values the transaction at $60 million. It includes the units that will emerge from converting the lender's preferred shares into ordinary stock. South Africa's telecommunications operator MTN has listed on Nigeria's stock exchange 18 years after it mooted the plan. The listing of 20 billion shares worth of $6.54 billion makes the company the second largest stock by market value after Dangote Cement. CGTN's Kalechi Emmanuel has more.
The bell going off as MTN lists for the first time on Nigeria's stock market on a Thursday afternoon. The company's shares traded for 16 minutes and that was enough for its value surge by 10%. Nigeria is MTN's biggest market with more than 52 million users. The company had initially planned for an IPO but ditched it due to its long-running disputes with Nigerian regulators. MTN feared it would not get a fair valuation amidst disputes.
All I can promise is that irrespective of the initial hitches that you might experience, MTN will be one of the companies that will help this market deepen. We were to have an IPO, but due to unforeseen circumstances, we couldn't do it. But we had wanted to list. They said half a bread is better than none. We have listed. Soon you will see us coming back for an IPO.
Among some of the troubles MTN is battling with Nigerian authorities is a $2 billion tax evasion claim. The Central Bank of Nigeria also accuses it of flouting existing rules when it repatriated dividends worth $8.1 billion. MTN says it settled with the Central Bank of Nigeria after paying $53 million, but it's uncertain when all disputes with Nigerian authorities will be put to rest.
If I knew that, it would be a magic wand. I don't know. Obviously, we're working on it, right? And, you know, we've gone through some of these things before. We had the subscriber issue in 2015. We had the challenge with the CBN recently in terms of the CCIs, and we're working on it like we did with all of those. I'm quite comfortable we will come up with a solution at some point in time. But as to the timing, it's very difficult to give a view on this.
Thursday's listing is part of government's condition to MTN, but it could significantly sway public sentiments in its favor. For a very long time, MTN is viewed as a foreign company predating on local market potential here. What the listing does is to open it for Nigerians to have a piece of it and in effect weaken the notion that it's entirely a foreign company here to make profits. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
South Africa has signed a deal on an oil block in South Sudan as part of a $1 billion investment in the country. The deal will see South Africa's state-owned oil company, the Strategic Fuel Fund, and the Nile Petroleum Corporation jointly explore an area of 31,000 square kilometres. CGTN's Angelo Coppola with the story.
The South Sudanese petroleum minister is in South Africa to finalize the details of the comprehensive exploration and production sharing agreement.
And it is actually going to be operational as soon as possible. And that's why I'm here to meet with my counterpart also to see where we can actually move quickly. And this is a deal, this block is one of the best in the country. And if we can move quickly, we can realize the fruits of this agreement.
This is a multifaceted deal. On a technical level, the parties have agreed to a 6-year program.
We'll start with the first year, we will do gravity, and then after the gravity, we'll do seismic, and then after seismic, we'll do drilling, and then after drilling, we'll do production. These are the steps that we have agreed in the agreement, and the technical team from both sides, from South Sudan and South Africa, they are working, they have already started working.
South Sudan is currently producing around 175,000 barrels a day, and hopes to be near its target of 400,000 barrels soon. For that to happen, it needs security of distribution via pipelines through Sudan. The situation there, however, remains tense.
Maybe you have heard about me going to Sudan more than 4 times now to make sure that stability, because I've been sent by the president to make sure that the oil flow is not interrupted because of the internal differences that Sudan is going through.
Looking ahead to when the South African block comes on stream, there's a concern around distribution. Solutions are being sought and new pipelines are being considered by Ethiopia and Uganda.
South Africa is also interested in investing in a pipeline, a refinery, and also a block. They have secured the block now. Then they want to get into having a refinery and also a pipeline. They have earmarked $1 billion to do this investment in South Sudan.
South African consumers are going to have to wait between 6 and 7 years before oil starts flowing down from the South Sudanese into South Africa. In the meantime, they're going to have to put up with increasing fuel prices. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Sandton, South Africa.
The planned acquisition of Anadarko's African assets by Total SA is regarded as a fit for the company's overall strategy. Anadarko Petroleum Corporation currently holds resources in Algeria, Ghana, Mozambique and South Africa. Total has agreed to purchase all of the oil-producing assets for $8.8 billion. However, the deal is dependent on the $38 billion proposed bid for Anadarko by Occidental Petroleum Corporation, which outmaneuvered its rival Chevron. The acquisition sets a refocus by the company to bolster its liquefied natural gas operations in Africa in efforts to build up a strong balance sheet. Olympic sprint champion Usain Bolt has launched his brand of electric scooter with a swappable battery at a Paris tech fair. The co-founder of Bolt Mobility unveiled the new mode of transport which aims to tackle environmental pollution caused by traffic congestion in big cities. Bolt Eco Scooter is set to compete with 9 other companies, including California-based market leaders Lime and Bird. While speaking at the Viva Tech event, Bolt called on startups and industry leaders to foster creative technological exchange to transition to a better environment.
Traveling all around the world to different cities throughout my career, I've noticed one thing, and that's always traffic. It's one of the biggest problems, and the way the world is going now, the environment is under attack by cars and all these different things. So for me, the scooter was the way to go. For me, the less cars on the road for the environment, first of all, is always going to be a better thing. You know what I mean? So for me, going to London and getting on a scooter to just get to the shops or to just get around with a friend, it's a no-brainer for me, and it will help. It will be a solution for a lot of problems.
We are going to a short break now. When we come back, a specialised dog unit takes drug awareness message to South African schools.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Ministry of Industry in Tunisia has organised a wood design competition which has gathered the best wood artisans and craftsmen in the North African country. The initiative aims to revive ancestral traditions and show the latest wood innovations and trends. Awards were given to exhibiting artisans for best accessories, original art and fine craft, as well as furniture.
Tunisia has hosted the prestigious Wood Innovation Design Award. Artisans from many regions exhibited their latest creations.
The quality and originality of wood designs are surprising. The award gives a push to the careers of young artisans and entrepreneurs who have chosen a different path in their professional life.
One of the winners of this year's edition is a 22-year-old craftswoman. She's used natural materials to create useful and lightweight furniture.
I have been working on my project for 12 months from design to delivery. I created a floating picnic furniture. I used cork molding in a unique design.
Shukri Soltani is a well-known craftsman in Tunisia. He was born and raised in the northwest of the country. The region is very rich in timber, which he transforms into toys for kids. Shukri has defied his handicap.
I'm disabled. I can neither walk nor run for miles, but wood design is my passion. However, I can design toys of different shapes and styles, which accompany children for years. My creations are also used as home decor.
According to the Ministry of Trade, wood industry in Tunisia exports around $150 million to foreign markets. It employs more than 40,000 people who are active in about 400 small and medium-sized enterprises. In addition, 10,000 artisans and designers work in this vital sector. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
To South Africa now, where a specialised police dog unit has been taking a drug awareness message to schools in an attempt to warn students about the dangers associated with illegal narcotics. This is also part of a sustained attempt to clamp down on drug use and distribution in the gang-ridden communities on the Cape Flats. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more with this report.
Manenberg is one of Cape Town's most gang-infested communities, where drug use is a major problem, and these kids often end up being the victims. But now the Metro Police's K9 unit hopes their own version of Paw Patrol will be a big hit with learners, but their show also has a serious message, in that there's no place for illegal substances in today's society. They're using their highly trained dogs to show off their skills in anti-drug operations, with the hope that word will get out into the communities.
If the kids go out and they can spread the message that, hey, Metro Police has got these dogs and what the dogs can do, it will actually help us even to curb crime, because people will be now aware of, we can't hide the stuff here, we must move our stuff.
The unit consists of 25 dogs who achieved almost 50 arrests since the beginning of the year. But when they're not working the streets, they work in the schools. And with their powerful jaws, they are sending a powerful message. These hounds are quite well trained to also track down firearms, stolen copper cables, and even searching for missing kids. But their presence at schools also acts as a deterrent.
We've got a program that we come to schools, if they invite us to come and do the searches, that they don't bring drugs or any paraphernalia to school. And yeah, just to deter, to be a sort of a deterrent also.
Can I see the one? They've also done 110 school awareness sessions since last year, and the unit believes it's making some impact, especially as a disincentive. This school is one of the lucky ones, as the scourge of drugs hasn't reached the classrooms yet, but that's why integrated approaches like this are critical.
We talk to them about gangsterism and drug use. And this is just to give them an alternative perspective, because you don't know what message they're getting at home. You don't know what they're getting from those people who become role models to them for good or bad reasons.
Like any dog show though, there's often a fun component. And with applause and smiles like this, it's easy to see why the city's crack team of four-legged law enforcement officers is such a big hit with the kids. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
All the sports news coming up for you after the break, including we talk to Uganda's rising javelin star Josephine Lalam as she sets her sight on the 2020 Summer Olympics.
Africa, where champions are made